All right. Good evening, everybody. First off, can you hear me okay? If anyone can hear me, please just type a little comment in the box there. Wonderful. Thanks, Marisa. Thanks, Mario. And thank you, Carol. All right, 3 for 3. So we'll go ahead and get started. We'll join palms as we begin. And you can repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. And keeping the palms joined. All right, you can put the palms down. And good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining. There's a little piece I'd like to read just as we begin. Just pull it up here while you're all getting settled. Just had it. So I'm going to read this as we begin, and then I may read it later just as something to touch on later. But I just wanted to share a piece from an article I came across that I think is really beautiful. And this was the great teacher Jack Kornfield, who was sharing this story. And so he was quoted in an article saying the following: in certain temples that I've been to, there's actually a prayer that you make asking for difficulties. The prayer is, may I be given the appropriate difficulties so that my heart can truly open with compassion. Imagine asking for that. Again, the prayer that Kornfield references is, may I be given the appropriate difficulties so that my heart can truly open with compassion. And again, I'll share it a little later as people continue to join. But as we get started, I just wanted to throw out it as a question. How are you at dealing with difficulties? For those who are new, welcome. There's a chat box there, as you can probably see. So we'll take the first few moments just for people to kind of share and express their thoughts, again, to the question of how am I or how are you at dealing with difficulties? Because we're faced with a lot of them these days, probably more so than usual. I think if you go back a year from now, you had a lot of difficulties in your life, but they were different. And many of them in your control. Now the difficulties that we face are many of them out of our control completely. So I'm going to type the question in here. How are you at dealing with difficulties in your life? So if anybody wants to just go ahead and start sharing your answers there, can be as brief or as long as you'd like. We only have an hour though, so don't make it too long. And if you are just joining on now, I started by sharing, this is a quote from Jack Kornfield, a great teacher in the Theravada tradition. And he says, in certain temples that I've been to, there's actually a prayer that you make asking for difficulties. And the prayer is, may I be given the appropriate difficulties so that my heart can truly open with compassion. And then he says, imagine asking for that. So again, the question as we get started tonight is, how are you at dealing with difficulties? Always a little anxiety, but usually I persevere. 2020 is a whole different ball game. I miss my favorite cafes and restaurants. Yep, absolutely. Michael, depends on how much anxiety comes up around the difficulty. Acting contrary to my fear, anxiety is very difficult for me. Sure. So there's a difficulty that arises, and then the question is how much of the emotions of anxiety follow that. Marisa, well-timed question. Tomorrow is the anniversary of the loss of my brother. So based on how I'm feeling now, I'm doing okay, very nicely okay, good. And we will check in with you tomorrow as well. Lots of difficulties, tragic times we're in, a lot of trauma that we're experiencing. This time of year is difficult as well. The holidays are, for many, a wonderful, joyous time, but as they get closer and closer, the holidays typically can also be very challenging times and difficult times. And my sense is this year they're going to be even that much more challenging and more difficult. Most people are just not traveling, hopefully, sitting tight. And so people in places that you normally would see this time of year and through the new year are going to be quite different. So some people may be enjoying that change of pace, thinking, yay, I get to stay home. And for some people, it's going to be difficult. So anything else before we get started with meditation on how are you at dealing with difficulties? All right, so we will go ahead and we'll get started with the meditation practice. A couple things I'll tell you as we begin, especially for those who are new, and if you are new, welcome. Nothing's going to happen to you, okay? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. You're not going to figure anything out whatsoever. The mind that races all day long, just thinking and thinking and thinking, is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working? Is it not working? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds, sounds inside the room, outside, wherever you are. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And the practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all of that chaos. So don't expect anything from this. If you're sitting there waiting for some grand aha moments or deep realizations, you'll probably be pretty disappointed. So we're just going to sit, we're going to breathe, we're going to become aware of thoughts and feelings and sensations as they arise and sounds as they arise. I'll say things periodically. And as a reminder, what I say is not important. I speak only as really just a trigger to bring you back to the present moment. So when I say something, there's a good chance that you're lost in thought. Whatever thought that is irrelevant. The challenge is to just bring it back to present moment using breath. So posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, help slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten, shoulders are relaxed, hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, don't expect anything. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, you'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Knowing throughout the practice, you'll hear sounds. These are not distractions, not disruptions. Simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice. Observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Return to breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe, knowing with each breath there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly, And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. And ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around you or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means for all of us is things happen, we react. More stuff happens, more reactions, that's it. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to everything else that's happening throughout our day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful. Whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused. Distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not necessarily easy, not always fun, but meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else. Becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. That's the practice. As we go on this practice, we will face lots of difficulties. And I'd like to share again now what I opened tonight with. And it's just a little piece from Jack Kornfield, who's a great Buddhist teacher in the Theravada tradition. He says that in certain temples that I've been to, there's actually a prayer that you make asking for difficulties. The prayer is, may I be given the appropriate difficulties so that my heart can truly open with compassion. And he says, imagine asking for that. So imagine asking for difficulties. A lot of us have so many difficulties in our lives, we don't need to ask for them. We have enough. Imagine having more difficulties. And when I read this, I was really struck by it. Appropriate difficulties so that my heart can truly open with compassion. So I've talked about this in the past, but we use the word difficulty as a way to describe a current situation that's occurring. But ultimately, and the way I see this is, for me, what the study and practice of the Heart Sutra is that the word difficulty falls away because there's just moment-to-moment experiences. So in each moment-to-moment experience, if your heart opens and you have the compassion for that moment or the wisdom for that moment, there is no difficulty. There's just embracing life as it is. Heart open, mind open, no judgments, no anger, just present moment experience. For me, that's what the Zen practice is. It's a present moment experience. And in the present moment experience, there is no difficulty. There's just that moment. Now, when we stop and we label and judge and critique that moment, then we create a story in our head, and that story doesn't align with what we want and what we crave and what we desire, and therefore we call it a difficulty. And again, we can use the expression like in the quote, we can ask for difficulties because we know what that word means. But where he talks about the heart opening, to me, that's really the essence of this practice, is that you face each moment with compassion, each moment with wisdom. And when difficulties arise, which they will, based on our judgment of each moment, these are opportunities to practice. Our greed, our anger, our ignorance, our attachments, our cravings, our desires, wishing things were this way or that way, wanting it to be this way or that way. Again, these next 6 weeks are a nightmare for so many people. The year-end time frame around Dharma Bum Temple and most religious spiritual places during this 6-week stretch is usually very hectic and busy because the world is a hectic, crazy mess. Now it's a hectic, crazy mess with a crazy pandemic and everybody locked down in their own ways. So we have depression on the rise. We have all these things that are occurring. So it's an opportunity to open the heart and have compassion for all that you have, appreciation for all that you have. And instead of focusing on all the things that you can't do this time of year, or that you don't get to do, or you places you can't go, or people you can't see, focus on what you do have. Someone asked recently, they were looking for a certain Buddhist statue. It's a Vairochana statue, very specific statue to a Japanese school of Buddhism, the Shingon school. And they asked if we had one of those at Buddha for you, and we don't. And my response was, when they said, "Do you have the statue?" I said, "Just look in the mirror." And knowing that the person would understand this, that Buddha nature that is in all of us, that gentle heart filled with compassion, this is the time you need it most right now. So, and with that, I'll go ahead and I'll stop and I'll open up to questions. I always prefer to use the rest of the time to respond to anything that's on your mind. So meditation, Buddhist practice, anything I can address. If you are new, again, welcome. There's a chat box there, as you can probably see on your screen somewhere. So feel free to just type in a question or thoughts, and I'll go ahead and respond. So we'll open up to questions. I found that though I didn't pray for any difficulties, I got them. And because of this practice, I'm able to recognize the lessons. Yeah, definitely. And I think I say it kind of, jokingly, but very seriously, in that so many of us have just such crazy, hectic difficulties in our lives right now that it's almost like praying for them would be just too much. But I'm glad, Vicky, that you and I'm sure everybody else understands that the idea is obviously not wishing difficulty on anyone, but embracing them as they arise. And as you say, this practice is really about recognizing those difficulties and seeing where we can apply these teachings to our lives. So, other thoughts, questions, meditation, Buddhist practice? There are so many types of Buddhism. Which school or type of Buddhism is Dharma Bum Temple considered? We're the good kind, Mario. It's a great question. It's a question that is always asked, or often asked, and frequently asked by people who are new to Buddhism. Because as you begin to explore Buddhism and you open up a couple books or a couple websites, you'll see things like Mahayana, Theravada, Vajrayana. And people often ask, okay, well, where does the Dharma Bum Temple fit? What are we? And in brief, Mario, since I know you're relatively new here, we opened the Dharma Bum Temple to, as we used to say, be a bridge to introduce all schools of Buddhist practice to local folks. So we don't have one specific school of Buddhism, but we have shared the Buddhist teachings from all different traditions. Myself, personally, I come from a Taiwanese, a Chan, or what is Chinese is Chan, Japanese is Zen, Pure Land practice. So it's a mixture of Zen and Pure Land Buddhism for me personally, but that's not the approach at the Dharma Bum Temple. It's just my personal practice. We have people who have Tibetan backgrounds. We have people who have more of a Theravada background. So even as you explore the Dharma Bum Temple schedule, we've always had different nights with different traditions of Buddhism being shared. So I think in brief also it's important to understand that they really all stem from the Buddha himself. He taught 2,500 years ago, 500 years BC. And when he died at 80, the teachings then really stayed kind of in India, and then eventually a few hundred years as they spread south, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia. And you have what's called the Theravada school of Buddhism, which used to be called Hinayana, but Theravada means of the elders. So that's often considered kind of the original old school teachings of the Buddha. And then around the turn of the first century, Buddhism goes north, China, Japan, Korea, and you have the development of Mahayana Buddhism. So that's about 500 years later. And then about 1,000 years after the Buddha died, it goes into Tibet, and you have the development of Vajrayana Buddhism. So you have these three major schools, Theravada, which originally was Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. So the word yana means vehicle. Hina is lesser, Maha is greater, Vajra is diamond. So you have what's referred to as the lesser vehicle, the greater vehicle, and the diamond vehicle. But a council came together and realized that it wasn't really appropriate to call one school of Buddhism greater or lesser than the other, so they changed it to Theravada, which means of the elders. So hopefully that helps. Mario, that's kind of briefly it. Our focus always with the Dharma Bums has been to share the different schools of Buddhism and allow people to see what resonates deeply with them. Most Buddhist places you go to kind of in a Western, the US, Canada, Europe, there'll be a lot of cultural Buddhist temples. And so we wanted to pull a lot of the cultural barriers and languages and the bowing, the chanting, the robes, and the cultural overlay out of the teachings so much and just stick to what are the core teachings of the Buddha. So Joan, the question of where does Soka Gakkai Buddhism fit? So, Soka Gakkai or SGI, a lot of people will know them as the Nam-myoho Renge Kyo school of Buddhism. It's a chant. They studied the Lotus Sutra. It's founded by Nichiren. It doesn't fit anywhere in anything I just mentioned. The interesting thing about SGI, Soka Gakkai, is that Nichiren, its founder, and the way it's shared and taught today, is they say that the Lotus Sutra and these teachings are the only teachings to follow in Buddhism, which really contradicts what Buddhism is about. There's a teaching in Buddhism, it says there's 84,000 paths to awakening, meaning there's various journeys and schools and paths to take within Buddhist practice. The Lotus Sutra is a beautiful sutra. The chanting is beautiful. The teachings are beautiful. But it kind of exists in its own little world. The Lotus Sutra is part of really Mahayana Buddhism, so I can back up and say that a little bit about the sutra. Lotus Sutra being a Mahayana Buddhist sutra. But again, it is the only school of Buddhism that says this is the only school of Buddhism, and they don't want you really studying or learning anything else. So hopefully that answers your question. Sutra is, so the word sutra comes from suture, and it means a thread. So when the Buddha spoke initially, again, 500 years before Christ, everything was memorized. All the monks and nuns, they would memorize the teachings. And, they weren't sitting there with their iPads, typing it or recording it. It was just an oral transmission. And they eventually started transcribing them onto palm leaves. So it was eventually written down, many years later. But the sutras, again, think of suture as a thread. And so when they say Buddhist sutras, these are the teachings of the Buddha, which have all been written down for the most part. And most sutras will start out with, thus have I heard at such and such place, at such and such time, the Buddha once said, because again, they're retelling what they heard the Buddha say. And often people say, are there like in Buddhism, is there teachings like in the Bible? So I wouldn't look at the sutras as the Bible or the Torah or the Quran or anything like that, but it is a body of the teaching. So in some ways it's the same thing. So sutras are teachings of the Buddha. Absolutely, Joan. I'm happy to patiently answer your questions. If I wasn't patiently answering your questions, I shouldn't be sitting here right now. So, other questions? It can be overwhelming. I mean, you look at these two questions, you have people who've been studying and practicing Buddhism for years, and then you have people who are brand new and, want to know about the different schools of Buddhism and what the word sutra means and things like that. And that's, to me, the beauty of what we've always done with the Dharma Bum Temple is welcome people who are at all different kind of stages of learning, and try to simplify it for you, because Buddhism can be overwhelming and confusing. But it's important to understand that ultimately Buddhism is not something outside of you. It's what you put into your day-to-day life. It's what you put into practice. So your everyday life is Buddhist practice. Yes, it is. Absolutely. Let's meditate. We just did. So, other questions? Yeah, Joan, I don't know if you just joined, but yeah, for the first 20 minutes or so, we do a meditation practice. So if you missed it, you have to chime in next time, or just like rewind this recording and you can go back. Yeah, just join. Yeah, we go from 7 to 8. And so the first 5 minutes or so, we just kind of get settled in, and then we do about a 20-minute sit. So, but you can just rewind this recording and sit if you'd like. Other questions? What is a bodhisattva? A bodhisattva, so the word bodhisattva, bodhi means enlightened, sattva means being. So a bodhisattva technically is a enlightened being, but let me say a few things about this. Even tying it into Mario's question earlier about the different schools of Buddhism, or for Joan or anyone else who might be new, the Theravada school of Buddhism of the elders is not about the bodhisattva practice. The Theravada school of Buddhism is, one way to think of it is, it's very much the forest dwelling kind of remote practice, meaning I'm just going to remove myself from everyday life. And not for everybody, but the traditional teachings are you've renounced kind of the worldly pleasures and you're off living kind of monk or nun status, and you're focused on awakening yourself, because without awakening yourself, then how can you actually help anybody else? The Mahayana and Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism, which really is a form of Mahayana as well, is all about the bodhisattva path and the bodhisattva practice. There are 37 great bodhisattva vows. Practice is that, imagine you're taking a raft and you're going across the shore to safety, and you get across the shore to safety and you think, yay, I'm safe, but then you turn around and you see that everybody else is still stuck on the other side and they're trying to get safe to where you are as well. So the bodhisattva practice isn't just sending back the raft and bailing. The bodhisattva practice is actually going back and helping them. So the bodhisattva vow is to be reborn life after life until all beings are free from suffering. The bodhisattva practice is based on what I talk about constantly, because it's really my personal practice, which is the Paramitas. Paramitas means perfection. There's 6 of them, and they're generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. Generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom. And these are the 6. I'll type them in here for those who might be new. 6, Paramitas. You can just Google 6 Paramitas, and you'll be set for like 5 years. So a bodhisattva technically is the other thing I'll say about a bodhisattva is that a bodhisattva really is about a vow, and it's really your intention to liberate all beings from suffering. And it's a beautiful vow. It's a practice. But again, technically it's an enlightened being, but if anyone was sitting there telling you they're enlightened, then that's the first key to know that they're not enlightened. So hopefully that answers your question, Martha, on what is a bodhisattva. Book recommendations. Yeah, there's a lot of books out there. There's a great beginner book called Lotus in the Stream. And I'm a big fan of Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, especially for new people to Buddhist practice. Again, I'm a little biased as a Zen practitioner, but I think for me, the Zen practice was incredibly important at cutting through all the crap that was in my head and just bringing me back to the present moment. All the stories, all the ideas in your head of how everything didn't work out how you thought it should, and this whole future wanting it to be a certain way. The Zen practice is just cutting through all of that and saying, here I am now, and this is it. My entire life is this moment sitting with all of you answering Mario's questions about books. That's it. And I am completely 1,000% okay with that. In fact, there's nothing more in the world that I would rather be doing right now than answering Mario's question about books. That's it. And everything's okay. As soon as I start telling stories in my head about where I'd rather be, what I'd rather be doing, how I'd rather be, what blah, 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 then I'm a mess. So you abandon the story and you stay present. So for that, I like Zen Mind, Beginner Mind, Shunra Suzuki. Selfish plug, Buddha For You has them if you want them. You can buy them through Buddha For You. There's actually a pretty good book selection. Right now it's closed, but you can buy online and curbside pickup or ship. So, other questions, thoughts, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything else? I think it's important also to understand that, even just looking at the theme of the questions, that as a lot of you newbies are, starting to kind of tread lightly into this Buddhist practice, never forget that it's a practice. It's not something to understand outside of yourself. For me, Buddhism, and I got introduced to this 25 years ago in college, and it's been an everyday part of my life for the last 17 years since I started going to the temple in 2003. And then we started Dharma Bums end of 2006. And I think it's important to understand that for me, Buddhist practice has always just been holding up a mirror and looking back at it. And when you look in the mirror, you see yourself. And so Buddhism is not about anything outside of you. It's actually about turning inward and looking at the cause of why we suffer, why we are greedy, why we are angry, why we are ignorant, why we get sad, why we get depressed, why we get anxious. And just looking inward and beginning to understand the nature of your own mind. So in some ways, Buddhism can be confusing when we think about, there's all these different schools, and you got Mahayana, and you got Theravada, and you got Vajrayana, and you got Zen, and you got, China and Japan and Korea, and you got Thailand, you got Vietnam, and you got all these different teachers, and there's Thich Nhat Hanh, and there's a Dalai Lama, and there's Sharon Salzberg, and then there's Bodhisattvas, and then there's koans, and there's what is all this madness? Get to know the nature of your own mind. That's it. The rest is just fun stuff that really does nothing for you, but confuse you. So, anything else before we wrap up here? All right, and I will close with the same piece I read earlier a few times. I just, in case anybody missed it, it was a piece from Jack Kornfield, who's a great teacher in the Theravada Buddhist tradition. He said, in certain temples that I've been to, there's actually a prayer that you make asking for difficulties. The prayer is, may I be given the appropriate difficulties so that my heart can truly open with compassion. So I hope that none of us have difficulties, but we do. And when we face these difficulties, may we always face them with a wise and compassionate heart and mind. So we'll join palms as we close. Thank you, Linda and Brian. Good to see your name typed on a screen. We'll close with what's called a transfer of merit. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained be transferred to those who need it most. So just a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma Bum. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 14 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to local folks, many of whom have been beginners all these years. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students, we're just practitioners. Buddhism is free. It's just a practice. We have different classes going on every night. We closed March 12th, so we've been closed coming up on, 8 months now? We've been shut down because of the pandemic, so we're doing our best to keep the community as safe as possible. So we have about 90% of our classes online now. Just go to the website, thedharmabums.org, and on the calendar schedule there, you'll see the different classes each night. We do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday on YouTube, and the rest are on Zoom. We have a recovery sangha for those battling addiction, a family group, teenage group, college group, morning meditation. So there's always something going on. So please check it out there. If you have any questions, just let somebody know through the website. Please be safe, stay home as much as possible, wear a mask, and let's not do anything to get anybody in risk of being sick. That would be, for me, it's a beautiful Bodhisattva practice to be aware of. So thank you all for being here. I wish you well, be safe, and we'll see you soon.